So let's continue our discussion of experience. This is the third video. Please watch the first two beforehand. So when we left off, I talked a bit about painting and discovering alchemy, about kind of orientations of mind, things that emerged that seemed out of place. So around about this time, I got a mysterious leg injury that appeared to be nerve-related. So my leg from the hip down, my right leg, fully shut down. There was no feeling, no muscle, no ability to move the muscle. It literally happened as I was walking in the park. And then suddenly I had to sit on the ground. I was walking with a friend, and the leg was fully shut down. I was able to get a Western style analysis, MRIs and X-rays and such 6 months later. They couldn't find anything wrong. I was in my mid-20s. They're saying, you have a spine of an 18-year-old. There's nothing pinched. There's nothing. So it remained mysterious. I came to think of it as a path correction. As you can see how I might think that. So leading into that, I had been doing hot yoga, these 90-minute Ashtanga-based yoga classes in 105 or whatever it was degree heat. Every day for 4 years. I mentioned that because I think it was an important physical restructuring, an important physical foundation. The Taoist tradition, every Enlightenment tradition has practices to build this kind of foundation. I had not yet discovered Taoism and my resonance with it. And this was a great practice. It was extremely healthy and strong and flexible as a result. I started out not that way. So I think it's important to mention that. Often people have a habit of dismissing the practice that led to a pivotal moment. Practice Zen for 15 years and have a sudden awakening and say, oh, that Zen was, all that sitting was irrelevant. The awakening simply happened. Of course, that's a speculation that's hard to agree with. So I want to establish that there was a clear foundation. But I couldn't practice when my leg didn't work. I suppose I could have in a modified way, but it definitely interrupted my practice. And it was right about this time that I had encountered Taoist alchemy on that webpage that I mentioned, and I was also reading about it in a Shaolin martial arts book. It was all new to me and confusing. What is qi? What is energy? What does all this mean? But I resolved to heal myself in this direction by moving in this direction. And at the same time, I had the good fortune to encounter a book, the first book in English by the person who would become my teacher, Wu Zhongxian. And I had a very clear response to his voice in the book. And he was teaching in the States at that time in these week-long intensives, 2 tracks, kind of a Tai Chi track, Qigong track, but really just teaching Taoism through these forms. So I went to one, and the resonance was equally clear and even louder than I had initially anticipated. So I had a very clear kind of sudden commitment to complete sort of flip the light switch kind of commitment to the practice. And began practicing immediately. 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours midday, 2 hours in the evening, and sometimes 2 hours in the middle of the night. And much of this practice was seated or standing forms where you have a mudra, a mantra, and a visualization, and then often text and or talisman to support the understanding and integration of the dynamics of the form. And both because Master Wu's transmission was bright and full, and because the forms were ancient and full spectrum, authentic teachings, and because I practiced them so intensively, these things are my understanding in retrospect. I had kind of dramatic experiences relatively quickly because of all these things coming together and because of the foundation I had built. So the first was that I want to mention was very simple, and one that some people have even without any introduction, and one that is one a person encounters at the beginning of a journey, and that is simply the tangible experience of qi energy. And you feel it between your palms, you feel it moving through your body. During the face of this, I was able to see it. Because it's kind of common and kind of at the beginning of the path, sometimes we don't fully appreciate the consequences of that. But really, if you let yourself integrate the understanding that you have a very clear, tangible, repeatable, shareable experience of a invisible force and sort of semi-material viscosity of being, it's a big deal. It's different than how we see the world. It's different than the table we sit at, the chair we sit in. It's different than the nail we hit with a hammer. Of course, it doesn't end up being different, but it's even that simple experience can really change the way you see if you let it. Because reality is different than we at first perceive. And sometimes, for me, the this repeatable experience of feeling, moving chi started to open my mind in the sense of reshape my understandings. So, during this phase of deep immersion in study and practice, and that amount of practice has a sort of retreat style intensity and immersion, but it was in the midst of life, between practices. I continued making paintings and having shows and this and that, going about life. It wasn't a very social time because there wasn't much energy for that, but there was this kind of pervasive feeling that accompanied this intensive practice of luminosity in myself and in the world around me, almost kind of sparkling encounter with reality. And during this time, I had a long phase during which my sleep-wake pattern became this sort of continuity where it was as if one was the other and vice versa. I would lay down to sleep and I would be vibrating with energy. And I would not feel as if I slept or that I lost consciousness at all through the night. And then as I moved through the day with energy and, I clearly had the rest I needed. But as I moved through the day, I experienced life as if I was asleep, as if I was dreaming. It's hard to explain sufficiently well, but it was a very clear sort of continuity of an apparently altered state, but felt like actually a more real state. And it lasted some months. And it was a really remarkable experience, and one that I wish had been, in a way, just the state of being from then on. Sometimes I have thought of it as potentially a window of a future, more integrated state. And that would be fun if that were the case. But it definitely changed the way I sort of relate to my waking consciousness to have had that experience. So after that experience, I had another experience that is mentioned in the scripture or the alchemical poetry now and then, which is the sweet liquor of long life. The had lasted for a year or more. That my saliva changed to be particularly smooth and viscous and tasted like honey. My mouth tasted like honey all the time. Um, and my understanding is that that's a certain stage of the refinement of the energy. And like all of these changes, they seem to present as if they are they're surprising when they arise, and then eventually they get more and more subtle, and they kind of integrate and dissolve into your everyday, into your normal being. That was also true of a kind of activation of all the when I say activation, what I mean, the experience of each of the energy centers, not just the three lower, middle, and upper dantian that we relate to and practice in Taoism, but all the other, I'll say, chakras, because that's how we commonly think of them. So it was outside of the tradition I'm practicing in, but in any case, all of my chakras they weren't spinning. I had people talk about them spinning. That wasn't my experience. They were all expanding and contracting in a very sort of dominant in my experience kind of way as I move through the day. So these kinds of things and the ways in which they correspond to the things that we read in the scripture or the stories or the alchemical poetry, in addition to being enjoyable and interesting in themselves, and my teaching, which I followed from Master Wu, was always to don't get tangled up in the experiences, let it be, come and go, don't worry about it. And I followed that advice, and I also enjoyed the change as it came, the change as I watched it go. So it was during this time, around these phases that I'm describing, that late one winter night, I was reading a translation of the Golden Flower, The Secret of the Golden Flower. This was the Thomas Cleary version. And I've said elsewhere, I think, in the video on transmission, I think, because I felt like I received a transmission from this text, in spite of its errant translation. I would in no way suggest that Cleary lacked knowledge of, Chinese in some way, but perhaps his relationship to it was one of less respect than I'd be inclined to give it, or maybe not. In any case, I was reading a kind of convoluted translation of the Golden Flower and had a sudden awakening. And it was like a lightning bolt. It was like a really loud clap. I didn't hear thunder, so it wasn't like quite like that kind of thunder and lightning. It was almost like two pieces of wood slapped together, like a clear clap, clack, but really loud, like it hurt my ears. And all of my perceptual world was replaced with expansive bright white. And I'm not sure how long it lasted. I was by myself. But probably not long. I was sitting in front of a fire. To my recollection, the fire hadn't like burned out, for example. But as my sort of perceptual world reassembled itself after that experience, I had a little bit of feeling of shock, like what happened, where am I? And then I realized there was this kind of clicking into place that had happened in my mind. And aspects of things that I had read in scripture and poetry were kind of flashing in front of me in this new and perceived with this new understanding. So I had this, this was like 2 a.m. or something, and until the sun came up, and then I think in the days that followed, I was just flipping through all of this scripture with this feeling like suddenly I understand in a direct, non-cognitive way. And it's a really remarkable experience. And it was also during this time, it's a little bit of a detour, but it was in the story, but it was also in this time that I was reading alchemical poetry or scripture translation, and I was realizing like I could hear the meaning behind, but I could see that the translator was not getting it or getting it across. And so that was when I started to translate. And that was a very slow building process. Piece by piece. I didn't speak Chinese at the time. So that was it. It's an interesting experience to have. It evoked in me a different quality of devotional relationship to the path. As you can tell from my story so far, I was fully committed. But there was a different quality after that to the kind of awe and wonder and profundity with which I related to the path, the scripture, and now reality. My learning from Master Wu didn't include much kind of prayer, altar, ritual in that way, practice. I felt drawn to practice in that way. Um, and it was then that I became very clear about wanting to be ordained and have this kind of relationship to the path in addition to my lineage connection and practices through Master Wu, which were hermit lineages. And I had at that time already, early on in my study with Master Wu, I went to China with him and other students, and we visited many sacred places that left a lasting impression. One was the tomb of Wang Changyong, who is the founder of the Complete Reality lineage. And the tomb is in a place I think not publicly known, at least that was my understanding as when we went to it in 2008. And we went to this particular temple and knocked on the door for quite a long time. It wasn't a planned visit. And they eventually came and opened the gate and welcomed us in. And to my knowledge, sometimes it's confusing in translation, but as far as I could understand, they were explicitly saying that we were the first Western visitors to have this opportunity. And it was wild. It was this underground tunnel. I don't remember the doorway to get in, but it was under the temple. Again, not marked by any signage or anything, just a secret place. And just like in some Dan Brown movie or something, this arched tunnel built with stone, damp. You walk a ways and you come into this small domed room, and in it is a plain stone tomb. And in this tomb, Wang Changyang completed his transformation, his realization. And as the story goes, he lay in that tomb for 3 years and then came out. And if I'm remembering correctly, communicated with students around him and then transcended. I may not remember that exactly right. But there was a very palpable feeling being in this room with this stone. What would you say, sarcophagus? I guess so. So I wanted to tell that story first because it was coming to me as I spoke. But then also, we went to the Dragon Gate Caves temple, which was founded by Chuchuji, student of Wang Changyang, and that was the temple at which the Dragon Gate lineage was founded. And this is a beautiful cliffside temple built. The structures were built around the caves, and apparently for thousands of years before Chuchuji, there were masters cultivating in these caves. Um, but he took over the temple, or took over the community, and later a temple would be built, funded by Genghis Khan, who was a student of Chuchuji, and Genghis Khan funded the initial temple development in all of China. And there's a stone there that marks the spot where they sat and discussed the teachings. And his conversion was credited with saving thousands of lives as he became oriented toward peace and harmony after that. It was late in his life. So these are some of the sketches of this place, but this place is in this telling because it had a very clear imprint on me, and it had a connection with the abbot, and just a kind of joyful he'd hold my hand and try and feed me, and just had a good connection. And one of those caves, the Three Immortals cave, we practiced in as a group, and I practiced on my own a couple of times. And at the space of that cave, the energy of that cave left a deep impression that was very present in my meditations during this time that I've been telling about today. And so after this kind of sudden awakening moment, this connection was very active and began to be populated by masters. And as I would sit and find I was there in meditation, I would be sitting in a circle of sometimes several, but often many. Would it be maybe a dozen or something? Masters, and I get these sort of bright light transmissions from their eyes. Especially the one in the center directly across from me, which my intuition was kind of a combination of all of them. So it was about this time. This video must be getting very long. I don't know. It was around this time that I began to perceive immortals outside myself, outside my mind, sitting in the room with me. And there was 3 of them. They would sit to my left, to my right, and in front. And I rarely had, and even since then have had, dialogue that is like talking to another human. I think that's part of other people's experience. But these were more shapes and presences and kind of intuitive telepathic transmission of understanding. But often just kind of presence and company and support. There's a very interesting, deep, productive phase. Eventually, so as I was practicing, as I was teaching, I was starting to teach at this time, I felt very much as if they were guiding that, sometimes one, sometimes the other, through intuition, and then through the very sort of physical feeling of them being inside me, was shaping the teaching and shaping my understanding as I studied and translated. Um, so all of these things were leading toward a kind of more devotional relationship to the path. I think I should wrap this video up. I want to share all of that again with the orientation that although your experiences will be different, these categories of experience are either already a part of your life or will likely be if you have a committed relationship to any path. This is one I know works, but of course, there are many paths up the mountain. So I'm happy to share those things, and I'll leave it there for today. But I appreciate you staying with me during this extended video. I'll see you soon.